Thank you, Barry. So, okay, so also we need to acknowledge the fact that so much of the information I'm going to share with you tonight is stuff that the indigenous inhabitants of this region figured out in the thousands of years they've been here and relied on foraging as a significant portion for their food and medicine and stuff like that. So I'm so grateful that information has trickled down to me. And since we're in a library, I got to talk about a book. If there's one book I'd like to point you to that I heartily recommend to get more in-depth knowledge on this subject, it is this book right here, Braiding Sweetgrass. Or the more recent book, is that going to show up here? Nope, not in this slide. So anyway, let me go back. Okay, so I'll get the hang of this. I got a point here. All right, so anyway, so terrific book. And if you're like me and you have a stack of books on your nightstand at home and you say, well, I'll get to it a couple of years from now. Let me suggest this, that you have this book cut in line to read just one chapter of it. That chapter is called Honorable Harvest. And this chapter is about foraging. And in there, there's this list of principles that Robin has come up with that are very, I look at it as kind of a 10 commandments of foraging. And so she suggests you even take a copy with you as you go out in the woods. You're looking at a plant. Think, is it appropriate for me to harvest this? And how much can I take? And how do I tend this patch? How do I express my gratitude for the gift? How do I share it with people and stuff like that? And it turns out a lot of these principles, we describe them today as ecological in nature. But I understand that a lot of indigenous language don't have words for ecology and conservation, stuff like that, because it was so embedded in the culture. It's like, that's who we are. That's what we do. What do we need a word for that? So anyway, this is particularly important when it comes to native species, because native species often have important roles in the ecosystem. Animals rely upon them for food, as some other important portion of their life cycle. So I encourage folks, if you're gathering native plants in the wild, to do so with some forbearance and restraint, just to make sure that you don't upset the ecological balance in any way. But depending upon the part of the plant you're harvesting, there are going to be different impacts. For example, berry picking and nut gathering, those are relatively benign foraging activities because all you're doing is picking the seed dispersal portion of the organism. There's often a lot of those around. You gather some, it's not that big deal usually. But if you were taking plants up to harvest them or stripping all the flowers, all the leaves off plants to harvest them, you can imagine it could be a lot more traumatic for the plants. So do keep that in mind. Okay, so that is the native plants. But then at the other end of the spectrum, we have edible weeds and invasive species that also are in our midst, and that allows a much more guilt-free foraging opportunity. So, so here is a guidebook that came out in Massachusetts about 25 years ago. There are similar guidebooks in New Hampshire, and the purpose of this is to educate people about invasive species in Massachusetts. The Mass Invasive Species List and the New Hampshire and Vermont's one, they overlap quite a bit. So this book talks about 66 of what are considered to be the most ecologically disrupted non-native plants that are here. And several of them are in the show, and the food that I made is made from invasive species. We'll talk about that in just a second. So out of the 66 species in this book, at least 20 of them are edible. And as far as most ecologists are concerned, they'd be thrilled if we all picked and ate as many of these as we possibly could. I'm totally serious about this. This is guilt-free foraging. You cannot pick too many invasive species. You do not want to spread them out around in the process, but it's easily avoidable. Okay, so of those, here's some that I really like. So autumn olive, Japanese knotweed. I'm definitely going to give you examples of those tonight. And then there's a few more listed here. So so these slides are organized chronologically by foraging opportunities. So we're going to start in the spring and go through the season. But I want to just talk about this one because I want to feed you something right away. So this is a fruit that we're going to run into at Makebrook on Saturday. I puree the fruit and make a fruit leather from it. So that's what's in this container right here. So take a piece and pass it around. And there's more stuff for you to try out later at the end of the talk. Okay, so now we're going to start in the spring. Is there anybody here that isn't confident they could be able to recognize an ostrich fern, the fiddlehead fern in the wild? Stick up your hand and say, I'm not sure I know. Just one person. That's amazing, because in Eastern Mass, where I'm from, it is one of the biggest mistakes that novice foragers make. they'll be hiking in the spring and they'll see the ferns at the curl up stage, which almost all ferns go through, and they'll say, oh, fiddleheads, gee, that looks an awful lot for what I've seen for sale in the stores, on the restaurant menus. It must be the same thing. So they pick it and they bring it home and they cook it up and it tastes horrible. And they say, oh, where do we go wrong? Where they went wrong is they harvested the wrong species of fern. I only know of 2 species of fern that taste good that grow around here, and only one that's safe to eat in quantity, and that is this one. And this is indeed the ostrich fern. So I'm going to teach you very quickly, because most of you already know, the 5 ways to distinguish the ostrich fern from other species of fern. First thing you want to do is look at the clump. The clump is in a vase shape. You see like a half a dozen. That's pretty typical of the curled up fiddlehead parts coming up per clump. And if you cut those across section, it forms a U shape like celery stalk if you cut that cross section. And also wrapping around the croziers, the curled up part, this part right here are these brown papery scales, which flake off really easily with your fingers. So there's that. And then there's the habitat, the plant's like, oh, I forgot. So let me get back to indigenous language, which is sometimes has some really nice, is there a problem with that?
Yes, what we found.
Okay, I have another one. I saved your bacon. All right, let me find it.
That'll be fine if it's just one.
Yes, I'll take care of it. In the meantime, you guys get to start with this one. So, all right, and pass it around. Everybody gets some. It's the same thing, autumn olive fruit leather. Okay, so, all right, so sometimes there's really practical information about plants embedded into just language, and that's the case for the ostrich fern, is that the Maliseet tribe, where their traditional homeland straddles the Maine, New Brunswick border, the word they use to describe the curled up part of the ostrich fern, masos, is the same exact word they use to describe the circling motion a dog makes before it lies down. And when I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, I see the similarity. And that's what you get when you inhabit an area for thousands of years. You see patterns and you can compare similarities there. All right, so then where do you look for ostrich fern? Well, here, just about anywhere. They're really ubiquitous around here. But usually I'm going to alluvial floodplain soil, like along the Connecticut River. This photo was taken along the Connecticut River further south in Massachusetts, but that's where I often see ostrich ferns. Here, it's much more places than that, but that's one good place to look for them. And then the last thing to look for are these spore-bearing fronds, these fertile fronds here, that not every clump of fiddleheads will have those, but you'll see them in the patch. And if you cut their little stems in cross-section, they also form that use. So remember, all 5 things I just taught you, it's only the ostrich fern that all 5 of those things apply. Okay, so if you've ever, and I hope nobody's needed to do this because they're really everywhere, but if you have gone to the store and bought ostrich ferns and cooked them up and not been very impressed with them, you might want to try this cooking method, which was amply demonstrated to me by this naturalist, Vassar, who took a bunch of us to a patch of fiddleheads going along the Connecticut River, and she brought her camp stove with her to the fiddlehead patch, and we were eating those fiddleheads 10 minutes after we picked them. They were truly exquisite that way. So that's why I advise eat them as soon as you can after you pick them. Okay, anybody know what this plant is?
Is it that?
Very good, stinging nettle, yes. And this one I'm harvesting around the same time the fiddleheads are out. So this is an April foraging opportunity. So, and I will just cut off just the top inch of each plant right here. But these plants often grow in extensive patches. So even though you're just pruning the little top off, it doesn't take long at all to have hundreds of them. And then what I will do is just put them in a bag, bring them home, throw them in a bowl of water and stir around just to wash them. And then I'll take some tongs and just fling them into the cooking pot and then steam them that way. But first, let me say, in case you don't know, that the stinging nettle, it's not like poison ivy where you find it a day too late. You got into it, you get stung by stinging nettle, you know right away. But the good news is the sting rarely lasts more than an hour, and there are antidotes. I'm going to teach you an antidote in just a second. So, all right, so you've got your washed nettle tops in the pot like that. Put the lid on there and steam it for 6 minutes, and it will shrink quite a bit. And then you can eat it just plain, or you can incorporate it into different dishes, like this cream of stinging nettle soup. The recipe's in my book. And this stinging nettle ball is the retro spinach ball recipe from the 1950s, where we use Pepperidge Farm stuffing mix to hold it all together. Just substitute the steamed nettle greens, works really well. Anybody know what this plant is?
Mint.
It is a mint, yes. It's got the square stems and opposite leaves, which is characteristic of plants in the midfamily. This is catnip. Catnip has an opposite effect on people that it has on cats. It's a sedative, it's a tranquilizer. So people will drink catnip tea to relax after a stressful day. And you could use the leaves fresh or dry, either way. All right, so here is the antidote, one of the antidotes to the stinging sting of this plant called curly dog. It's also edible. And if you just take any tender part of the plant and you juice it up and you apply that juice to the sting, that works. The best thing though is sometimes at the base of the plant, you can find some goo, some mucilaginous goo that's kind of like aloe vera. And if you can find that, put that on your sting. It's like instant relief to do that. So anyway, so when these leaves are young and just finally unrolling, you can gather them. And what I will do is just blanch them, is drop them into boiling water for 20 seconds to take the bitterness away. Then you can use them just in cooked spinach. So in my book, I've got a recipe for wild green spanakopito, the Greek spinach pie with the phylodon and the feta cheese. You can substitute the steamed sticky nettle greens or the blanched curled up greens for the spinach. That recipe works great. Okay, so this is one of the most, hated invasive species on Earth. And it's all over the place here in the Upper Valley. And it's called Japanese knotweed. And it's a real management issue for land trusts and folks that have this on their property because it's very hard to control. And one of the ways it spreads naturally here in northern New England is from the actions of rivers when ice out happens in the spring. Because of these big chunks of ice, barreling the way down the rivers, and sometimes they slam into the riverbank where there's some Japanese knotweed and they dislodge some of the rhizomes, and the rhizomes will float downstream in the current and then wash up in another place and start new colonies. So it's going to require eternal vigilance to control this plant. In the meantime, the subtitle of the chapter on Japanese knotweed in my book is "If you can't beat it, eat it." It's a very tasty plant. So this time of year, it's already about this tall. It's going to get a little taller and start blooming with these creamy white flowers like you see there in the lower corner. So that's not poisonous. And actually, if you're a beekeeper, you like those flowers because your honeybees go there. So anyway, the time to harvest this plant is in the spring, latter part of April, early May. And so what you're going to see is all those dried reddish brown stalks from last year's plant. In the midst of that, you're going to see these green shoots coming up that look kind of like asparagus with little red dots on them. So if it's about a foot tall, you can harvest it and steam it and eat it hot or cold like asparagus. Or my favorite stage to get the plant is when it's a little bit taller, like a foot and a half or 2 feet tall, like this tall. Now cut it at ground level, lop off the top cluster leaves and have a length of stalk about that long. I'll peel the skin off of it. Then you have this crisp green tube, which you can see right here. So after you peel the skin off, and it's tart juicy, kind of like a Granny Smith apple, or you can chop it up like I've done in the bowl here and use those pieces instead of rhubarb in virtually any recipe calling for rhubarb. So here is my strawberry knotweed pie. The recipe's in my book. Virtually everybody I feed this to say this is even better than strawberry rhubarb pie. But you might be looking at this pie and saying, well, okay, but I'm a little intimidated by pie crust and that latticework top. I don't know if I can pull that off. So I'm going to show you a way to use this plant that requires no cooking skill whatsoever. And that is just to take those hollowed pieces and just fill them with a little, flavored cream cheese or salmon mousse or something like that. You have a delicious tart edible potato. All right, now I have to tell you that a number of years ago, we encountered Japanese knotweed in one of my walks, and I start bragging about my pie, and some smart aleck in the group says, well, of course your pie tastes good. It has strawberries in it. Now, those of you that bake and use rhubarb know there's all kinds of fun things you can do with rhubarb that don't involve strawberries whatsoever, including the sour cream knotweed crumb cake that's right over there that I made for you that you're going to get a chance to try at the end of the book. Because I thought, okay, I got to at least equip these people to, have maybe a nuanced attitude about Japanese knotweed up here and say, okay, I really hate it, but at least it's edible. Okay, so you'll see. I don't want to put, I don't want to prejudice you, but I hope you like it. I'll just put it that way. Okay, so here's another invasive species called garlic mustard that's here, definitely. I don't get quite as excited about eating this one because it's kind of bitter and pungent, but you can eat it. And my favorite stage to get at it is when the stems come up. This is probably end of April, beginning of May, when these stems are about 9 inches tall and they're nice and soft and flexible. You can just strip the leaves off them and just eat the stem. And that's relatively mild. It doesn't have the bitterness that most of the rest of the plant has. And then you can eat it raw, you can put it into stir fry, stuff like that. Okay, so this is wintercress. It's very common farm wheat. And if you see a resemblance to broccoli, you would be wrong because this is a wild cousin of broccoli. And the flavor when you cook it up is identical to broccoli raw. So if that's a flavor that you like, this wintercress can be a nice, so this is, once again, end of April, early May opportunity to eat this. Okay, this plant definitely grows here. In fact, we'll see the plants at McBrook on Saturday, but they won't be blooming anymore because it's more of a June thing. But you see how it comes in a white color and a purpley color. That's invariably how you see it in the wild, the two colors together. So it's a very easy plant to recognize. I'm not going to ask you if you think it's phlox, because I'm sure some of you do. You would be wrong. All phlox family flowers have 5 petals. You see there's only 4 petals on these plants. It's actually a plant called Dame's Rocket. So it's related to the garlic mustards and the wintercress. It's in the mustard family. And the flowers are very tasty. And although the white flowers and the purpley flowers have the same flavor, I tend to just use the purple flowers because purple's a funner color than white. And you can just add them to salads or any other food you're serving. And it's a nice thing. And it's an invasive species, it's a complete kill-free foraging opportunity. So now we eat garlic mustard, and this one, yes, there's no ecological downside to picking all the.
I have a quick question. Is that
Yes.
different plant than what we think is, or what I think is the phlox?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because these flowers have 4 petals. All phlox family flowers have 5 petals.
Oh,
So if you've been calling this phlox, that's a mistake.
okay.
All right, so you got some big mountains, not far away from here in the Upper Valley, but this one is not. That's actually the presidential range in the back of this photo. So, but the point of the photo is to talk about dandelions. Dandelions are responsible for turning more people off of eating wild food than anything else. And the reason is, in the spring, when you look out in your yard, you see all these dandelions blooming, you say to yourself, I heard dandelions are edible. I should try them. So you go out to your yard, you pick a few leaves, you bring them inside, you put a little oil and vinegar on, you take one bite, it's incredibly bitter, you spit it out, you say, yuck, I'm never going to eat a wild plant again, which is a real shame because dandelions are great if you eat the right part at the right time. So what is that and when is that? Well, when you start seeing whole fields turning yellow with dandelion flowers, I think it's too late to be eating dandelions, except for the flowers. But so my favorite stage to get the plants are at the flower bud stage before the flowers open. In fact, dandelion flower buds are among my favorite vegetables, period, cultivated or wild. The flavor's like a cross between corn, spinach, artichoke hearts, and Brussels sprouts. And so you pick the buds off the plant, you throw them in the bowl of water to wash them off. Then you got a pot of water boiling on the stove, throw the dandelion buds in there, cook them for 60 seconds. That's all they need. And then you can add them to soups, omelets, casseroles. But before you do anything with them, before you even put any salt or butter on them, just try them plain. I think you'll be amazed at how good they are. And if you want to eat dandelion leaves, this is the right time to gather them. So when I'm picking the buds off the plant, if I see some tender leaves mixed in with them, I'll just harvest them the same time, prepare them the same way. Okay, so this one's a little out of chronological sequence because this plant is chicory and it's blooming these blue blossoms. Has anybody seen those around here lately? Okay, I've seen a lot of nods. Okay, good. Glad I lifted in the show. So this is a very close cousin of dandelion. And if you look at the leaves, you could very easily mistake those for dandelion. It'd be absolutely no problem if you did that because they're edible the exact same way. So chicory, the leaves are edible in the spring or in the fall. In the summer, they're way, 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 way too bitter. Chicory flowers are edible. They don't have a lot of flavor, but blues and unusual food colors. It's fun to just snip the petals off and add them to a salad. You want to do it in the morning, though, because by the afternoon, they shrink up and go away. In the morning, that's when they're going to look that nice. And then the chicory root is the part that most people have heard of. Don't you make a drink from that? The answer is yes. So I'm going to tell you how to do that. Oh, let me say there is a way of blanching the chicory in your yard just by hiding it from the sun, and then that will reduce the bitterness of the plant. Okay, all right, sorry, going too fast here. Okay, so here's how you make the chicory drink. You just dig up the roots, cut them into uniform pieces, spread them out in a cookie sheet, roast them slowly in an oven until they become brittle and aromatic, and then throw those roasted pieces into a food processor and grind them up, and then you make a beverage from the grounds. And I find that I only need about half the amount of chicory grounds to make the same strength beverage as coffee grounds. And whatever device you use to make your coffee, your plunger, your percolator, whatever, you can use the same device to make the chicory drink. And the chicory drink does taste amazingly like coffee, especially if you usually drink your coffee with cream and sugar and you drink the chicory the same way. Flavor is really similar. One big difference is chicory does not have any caffeine in it. So if you're one of these people who says, what's the point of drinking it? If there's no caffeine in it, then chicory's just not going to cut it for you. Okay, so chickweed, really common, farm and garden, wild edible. It's mostly a cool weather edible, so I'm harvesting it earlier now. By this time of the summer, it's usually very leggy, not very good, unless it's growing in the shade. And I use it as a sprout substitute in a sandwich or lettuce substitute in a salad. It's quite good either way. So here are violets. So this is your common dooryard violets, the one that have the glossy heart-shaped leaves and the purple flowers. There are other violets that grow out here. Some of them are rare and you wouldn't want to pick them, and some of them actually have a laxative effect. But if you stick to these, which are the common ones that you see growing in your lawn, those you can eat. The leaves are edible raw or cooked. Flowers are edible just the way they are, or you could use them for decorating things like this black walnut cake. Daisies are edible, although by the time the plant does this, the best tasting part of the plant has already gone by. So you need to be able to recognize daisy plants before they bloom. And this is what you want to look for. So if you see right here is one. Here's one, I'm sorry, that's a little out of focus. Right there's another one. You see that the flower buds have a flat top to them and they have markings on them that looks kind of like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. So look for that, and then look for the leaves that look like that attached to the plants. And that's the best stage to eat daisy leaves. And sometimes they're so good that they just go right into a salad. I've never bothered to cook with them. Okay, here's sheep sorrel. So this is an indicator of acidic soil. So got some of that here in New Hampshire, a lot more than Vermont. And this is a diminutive cousin of the French garden sorrel. So you can use it the same way: sorrel sauce, sorrel soup. There's a completely unrelated plant with the same flavor called wood sorrel or sour grass. And the chemical responsible for the sour flavor in both these plants is a chemical called oxalic acid, which might not be good for you to eat in tremendous amounts, like a gigantic salvo full of either or both of these plants. If you ate that much, just that, it could inhibit your body's ability to uptake calcium, and it could irritate your stomach lining, but there's no reason to be unduly concerned about that chemical because it's present in a lot of conventional vegetables like beets and spinach and rhubarb. So as long as you're eating in moderation, it's perfectly fine. Okay, so here's two closely related plants: peppergrass, a native species on the left side, and poor man's pepper, species from Europe on the right side. They look almost identical. You do not need to know how to tell them apart because they have the same flavor. They're both members of the mustard family, and the seed pods have the flavor of watercress. You know, we have that kind of, or nasturtium leaves. You know, that strong kind of twist to your taste buds once you're nibbled on a little while. So the nice thing about the peppergrass, it has a really long season availability. So a lot of the stuff I've been talking about, you get a little window in the spring, and if you miss that time, you gotta wait for that time to come around the calendar next year. Peppergrass, it's from like May to November. You can find the one on the left at that stage. Okay, and so when I make stuff with wild ingredients, I'm not a purist about it. I don't insist that every single ingredient be wild. Like, for example, when I'm making that strawberry knotweed pie, I don't have to use yak butter for the shortening. I use regular butter, regular sugar, and then, you know, the knotweed makes it a wild dish. But it is fun to just make a salad, just some wild ingredients, which is what this salad is here. But I don't want to deter you from just throwing a few like dame's rocket flowers and violet flowers in the salad. It's perfectly fine, but you can go completely wild if you want to. So that's what's going on here. So in here, we've got chickweed and sorrel and other green stuff bulking up the salad. And then the little yellow flowers are mustard flowers, and then the little bluish flowers are chicory flowers, and then the red berries are partridge berries, and then the tomato-looking things are ground sugars. So here's partridge berries, and partridge berries have virtually no flavor. So why use them? Because they're pretty. So I'll put a few on top of a salad just to get that nice red color in there. And then the ground cherries have a very nice flavor. They taste like sweet cherry tomatoes. The key thing is, if you're looking for these, you cannot see the fruit ever, 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 unless you pull that papery husk off, like I did in the upper left-hand corner here. So if you're ever looking at a plant and you see something that looks like a tomato, it's not the edible ground cherry. If it's growing wild, it's probably a plant called horse nettle, which is actually poisonous, but it tastes so horrible. And I did this for you. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, you know, just going by what a book said. I want to make sure that it really tastes, and it is so repulsive. You know, you can't keep it in your mouth longer for more than a second because it's really nasty. And so I don't really worry about people getting poisoned by the poisons look-alike to the ground cherry, just to save you embarrassment in case you like put some in a salad. Whoa, what is that? So just remember, it's got to have a husk on it. All right. And the fruit ripens inside the husk. So these plants are blooming now because they're in the tomato family. So they don't really get going until the hot weather arrives. So, hope you find some. Okay. So this plant that, produces these round birds that get caught in your socks and your dog's fur in the fall. And the guy who invented Velcro did get the idea for these birds. So this is a plant appropriately enough called burdock, and it's got several edible parts. Probably the most well-known part is the root. Now, burdock as a species is a biennial. That means it has a 2-year life cycle. So the first year, in the beginning of the second year, it looks like this, just a bunch of leaves sending energy down to this big beige taproot. So if you want to harvest the root, you need to harvest it between the first and second growing seasons. That's when the max amount of food energy is in there. And unfortunately, you can't just grab the burdock foliage and yank on it and get a root out that way. They'll break on you. So you have to dig them up, which is a lot of work, and I don't usually bother. But if you did, you have this root. How do you prepare it? Just wash it up, slice it into 1/2-inch thick rounds, and boil it in salted water until it's tender, about 15 minutes. But as I said, I'm too lazy to do that. Instead, what I do is wait for the cylindrical flower stalk to show up. We've missed that time this year. The right time would have been like second week of June up here, when it's about this tall. So ground level here, top of the stalk. So I cut a ground level and bump off the top cluster of leaves, and I've got a length of the stalk about that long. So I'm peeling the outside like I do for the knotweed because it's bitter and stringy. But unlike the knotweed, burdock is solid all the way through. So after you have peel the outer part off, you've got a lot of food left over. And so you take those pieces and you boil them in salted water until it's tender, which is 6 minutes. And it's a very nice vegetable, just plain, or it's really good thrown in spaghetti sauce, or it's really good in a dish as a substitute for artichoke hearts. In a dish where you mix the artichoke hearts with Parmesan cheese and mayonnaise and breadcrumbs, and you bake it in the oven. It's a spread that you put on crackers, but you can substitute boiled burdock flower stalk rounds for the artichoke hearts. And that recipe works great. And that recipe is on my webpage. So the handouts that I gave you, if you see the bottom of those handouts, you'll see where to find me on the internet. I do have a recipe page. That recipe I just mentioned is there. Okay, and that's what it looks like when you make it. So that's it's very tasty. Okay, so here's a plant called catbrier, which is more common in southern New England. It's a real pain to bushwhack through. Smilax rotundifolia. So this is a cousin called carrion flower that I do see growing in northern New England, and it's a cousin of asparagus. And when you see it on the left, these shoots right here, you harvest them like asparagus, like my wife Ellen is doing there. You prepare them like asparagus. You eat them like asparagus, and they taste like asparagus. So why is it called carrion flower? Okay, so we're out camping and we're using a Frisbee as a plate here, and you can see these little spherical balls right here on the plant, like right here. Those are the flower buds. So if we had counted this plant a week after I took this photo, when those buds are blooming, then they look like that. And if you held your nose up to that, then you find out why it's called carrion flower, because it smells like dirty gym socks are rotting meat. So if you're encountering the plant when it's blooming, it can be rather unpleasant experience. But if you harvest the shoots before it blooms, it can be quite tasty. Okay, so this plant is native to Virginia, but was brought north by the colonists hundreds of years ago, and it has definitely naturalized itself. It's all over most of the land. It's actually an invasive species in Europe. You know, when we think about invasive plants, we think of plants from Eurasia that came here, but we returned the favor and sent them some of our plants, and black locust is one of them. So anyway, it's the flowers that are an edible part, and they smell like jasmine. They taste like sweet pea pods. They're great for stuffing your face right from the plant. It's around Memorial Day weekend. It's meant to look for these. And if you're seeing that bumblebee in the center of the photo, don't say to yourself, oh, that's a pollinator. I can't pick those flowers. I'm going to leave them for the pollinator. These trees are typically like 30 or 40 feet tall, and when they're blooming from the tippy top to the bottom. Let the bumblebees fly up to the upper branches and visit those flowers, and you can pick some from the ones that you can reach while you're just standing on the ground. And usually there's branches that are low enough to reach them. And so I have a chapter on black locust in my book, which includes a description of what I'm telling you right now, and also a recipe for black locust flower fritters, which is really good. There they are right there. And it's the kind of thing you can serve to company for brunch. They'll love them. So end of May is when to harvest this one. All right, then pokeweed. So pokeweed I saw it growing in Lyme, so I'm sure it's here in Hanover too. And so this is a native species that is edible when it's about 6 to 10 inches tall, and that's it. So by this time of year, completely not edible. Root is never edible. So what makes it not edible? It's got a purgative in it called phytolactin. So in very, very minute amounts, phytolactin might have therapeutic usage. But if you eat too much of it, it's going to make everything on the inside of your body want to get to the outside of your body through every available means as quickly as possible. Okay, so that'd be pretty nasty. So the key is only eat the shoots and then boil them for 7 minutes to make them safe. And let me show you the next slide that will help you. Okay, so that's a close-up of what a pokeweed shoot looks like. You might say to yourself, okay, pokeweed shoot. Oh, by the way, they taste good. Some people liken them to asparagus, but it's really its own unique flavor. So you say, well, I'd like to try it, but that shoot, I'm not seeing a lot of distinctive characteristics to it. There must be other lookalikes that look like that. And the answer is yes. So how would you know that's a pokeweed shoot? Well, here's the big favor the plant does for you is earlier in what happens in a typical season, it's a perennial, herbaceous perennial plant like Japanese knotweed, is at the end of the growing season, all this stuff that's now these big, thick, purpley stems with flowers that later on in the season are going to become those juicy berries, which are not edible, by the way. When the end of the growing season happens, all the berries fall off, all the leaves fall off, but the stem will not rot away, it will persist through the winter into the following spring and still be there when the shoots for this year's crop are coming up. So look for last year's pokeweed plant and then the shoots coming up in the same exact spot. And that's when you'll build your confidence. Okay, those are pokeweed shoots. All right, so milkweed is wonderfully edible. It has an important ecological role. I'll get to that in just a second. So in my book, I've got a chapter of milkweed, and the subtitle is Procrastinating Foragers' Dream Food, because it's these 4 edible stages of the plant, and they happen chronologically in succession. So if you mess up and miss a stage, just wait a while till the next edible stage develops. So this is edible stage number 3. The milkweed buds with their nice tight green cluster. You boil them for 7 minutes. Same cooking method for pokeweed and milkweed is you boil the part you want to eat for 7 minutes, pour off the water, and then they're safe to use. You don't have to do multiple boilings or anything like that. So, so those milkweed flower buds in that bowl to the right there, they've been cooked for 7 minutes. Look how well they held up. If anything, they look even nicer than they did when they were attached to the plant. So you can eat those just plain if you wanted to, or in my book, I've got a recipe for milkweed egg puff, which is like a cross between a souffle and a casserole. They're very good that way. And even the pods. So this is the stage the plants are at in the Boston area. So it should be, if it's not already here, it will be soon. So when the pods are up to 1 inch long, you can boil them for 7 minutes, and the texture and the flavor is really similar to green beans. Okay, but there is the monarch butterfly caterpillar to remind us how important this plant is to them, how ecologically important milkweed plants are to monarch butterflies and caterpillars and stuff. And so perhaps I certainly have had many people in my program say, I could never pick a milkweed plant, the monarchs, I'm worried about the monarchs. I support you in that sensitivity. I think that's great that you're looking beyond humans, other critters that need the plants that are out there. So if you're one of those people, I'm going to give you 2 coping mechanisms. First thing is there's a wonderful citizen science website called Journey North that plots the northward migration of monarch butterflies every season. And so in the very early spring, you see the little red dot showing up from Mexico, moving north into the Gulf of Mexico, the lower Gulf states, and then the Midwest, and then eventually Mid-Atlantic, and then eventually get to New England. So you just consult that website every once in a while, because until those red dots get to, this area, the monarch butterflies aren't here. So you just harvest the milkweed and enjoy it. And then once they show up, you can say, okay, they're here. I'm going to leave it alone and let them have it. That's one strategy. Another thing is to propagate this plant and just help get more of it growing out there, which is what I do. I'm happily propagating in my nursery, planting it out of my sites, including doing a project in Claremont, New Hampshire tomorrow, where milkweed is one of the plants we'll be planting there. And so let me show you what I'm doing at my house, where I'm walking the walk. Okay, so that's my house in the background. I have a different car now. I still have that boat. And by the side of our driveway, we had some blueberries growing. And the milkweed said, well, we'd like to grow here too, and that's fine. So we let them grow there. And we didn't this year, but sometimes we put a net over our blueberries so the birds don't get all of them, and we get some of them. But the monarchs figured out how to access the milkweed leaves with that net on there. We know that because one day we went out and we saw this crystals attached to a hinge in our garage door, and was good it was on that hinge, because when the door went up and down, the chrysalis just rode up and down for a couple of weeks until one morning we went out and the chrysalis was clear because the butterfly had metamorphosed and flown away. So if you want to walk the walk, a great way to balance out the foraging that you're doing is to add more native plants with ecological functions, which is almost all of them, to your landscape. All right, so cattail is a whole chapter in my book. I won't spend a lot of time on that one. It's got at least 5 edible parts. So what I'm showing in this photo is the immature bloom spike, which is hiding in here. It's a swelling near the top of the plant before it comes out. And so if you pull the outer leaves away, that's what it looks like inside. So you boil these up, and then the flavor is a lot like a cross between corn and artichokes. And then even so at the same time you're harvesting those immature bloom spikes, if you follow the stem into the plant, it gets all soft and wobbly, and that's the cattail heart, which you can eat just straight into your mouth. It tastes kind of like either like a cucumber or heart's palm, and has a similar texture. And then even the pollen is edible. And so I think the plants up here finish going through the stage, but this would be the last edible stage on the above ground part of the plant. And so you can go into the cattail marsh with a bag and just bend the flowers into the bag, give them a shake, this big cloud of yellow pollen comes off, and then bring that home and put it through any kind of a sieve just to intercept any beetles, any little twigs that got in there, and then add that pollen to flour to make these gorgeous looking and very nutritious cattail pollen muffins, crepes, stuff like that. Okay, so here's a completely unrelated plant that could be mistaken for cattail called sweet flag. And this is what I'll be also planting in Claremont tomorrow, because the site I'm planning on is property that was returned to the Quebec Abenaki band. And so this is a plant that has a long heritage of indigenous use for medicine. And so it's also edible by people. And the whole plant is a gingery flavor. And so I found that let's see if I can get the next page to show. So in the spring, when these plants first come up, you pull the outer leaves away, and the inner leaves are this nice, soft, light yellow color. And they still have the gingery flavor. And that's what I use to chop up and put into salads and stuff like that. Okay, so this plant, this photo happens to be the European species. This is the little leaf linden, Tilia cordata, which is very common in the Boston area. It's planted a lot as a street tree, and I suspect it's here in Hanover too. But you also have the native species, the basswood Tilia americana. You do not need to know which one it is. All Tilia species are edible. So those two, basswood and little leaf linden, and any other hybrid or any other plant that falls into that genus is edible. The 2 edible parts are the leaves and the flowers. So when the leaves first come out in the spring, they're soft and glossy and very nice to just eat straight into your mouth, or you can put them into salads, or you can do what they do with them in England, where they call them lime trees. And they make lime sandwiches, which are like the watercress sandwiches on the white bread with the crust cut off. And they just layer the young linden leaves as the filling for the sandwich. So that's the first edible stage. And then the second edible stage, which has just gone by, are the flowers. And the flowers give off this wonderful lemon honey fragrance, and they make an excellent tea. And you can use the flowers fresh or dried, and you can drink the tea hot or iced. It's good all those ways. Besides tasting good, it has at least 2 medicinal values, soothing to your digestive system and your mental state at the same time. So herbalists really love to recommend linden tea to their clients. Okay, so here's a plant that's easier to spot when it's blooming than when the fruit is ripe. So where I'm from, we call this Juneberry in southern New England, because fruit is ripe in June. In New Hampshire, I probably more accurately call it Julyberry, because the fruit ripens a little bit later up here. And so in the spring, it's one of the first plants to bloom, so it really stands out in the landscape, and that's the best time to see where they are and pick your spots and go remember where that is, because when the fruit is ripe in June or early July up here, it's a kind of a purple color when it's ripe, and it doesn't really stand out, so it's good to already know where they are. Now, these plants are relatively common native species growing in our landscape, but they're also Amelanchier genus plants are very commonly deployed in parks and other landscape areas. Some of the best foraging opportunities for these Juneberries, or you can call them surface berries, are in public parks where the plants are planted. So let's see if I have a slide for that. I might not have it. So no, that's in a different chunk. But I have a slide of how I picked over a quarter fruit from just a park near my office in downtown Boston. So yeah, so anyway, but you can find them in the wild too. And I have found some delicious service berries this time of year in New Hampshire, so you might still be able to find some. And then this one, the mulberries and Juneberries are ripe at the same time, so I like to mix them together. and make strudel from them, which is really yummy. Wild strawberries at that time is just finished up here in northern New England. But it is really fun, and I hope everybody has had the opportunity to just sprawl out in a patch of wild strawberries and just take in that wonderful fragrance they're giving off and just stuff your face by the plants. And several times this year, I've had the opportunity to be in places like that with just lots and lots of wild strawberries. So I used to say this was kind of like a 4th of July thing, but I have to tell you, I'm definitely seeing the ripening dates of things creeping earlier in the calendar, probably because of climate change. So in the back of my book, I have a chart which tells you when lots of stuff is ripe. But if and when we get that book printed again, we probably will. I'll put a statement in there saying that you should subtract a week or maybe even 2 weeks from the ripening time. So, anyway, so now I would say you got to look for these in June in New Hampshire to find the ripe seed. And the little strawberries are teeny, but they're delectable. And you can make tea from the leaves when the leaves are fresh or thoroughly dried. Apparently, when wilted, they're slightly toxic. Fresh or thoroughly dried is fine. And the tea does make from the leaves does taste vaguely like the fruit, and it does have vitamin C in it. So if you have a case of scurvy coming on, you can rush out and make yourself some strawberry leaf tea. Daylilies are edible, so those are still out now. So there's actually 5 edible parts on a daylily. The daylily tubers below the surface of the ground, the leaves when they first come up, or the tender part when they get a little taller, and then the daylily flower buds. The open flowers and the wilted flowers are all edible. And I'm going to guess that most of you have eaten daylily flowers because they're standard ingredient in the 2 Chinese food dishes, bushu and hot and sour soup. If you've ever had either of those, they usually put dried daylily flowers in those. Okay, but you see a with caution warning in here because apparently there's something in daylilies that disagree with the digestive systems of some people. It's relatively few of us. It's like less than 20%. But you might be one of those people. So the advice is to not actually, generic advice about food allergies is to eat a small amount of some new food you're just trying for the first time, just to make sure that you don't break all in hives, whatever. So you're one of these people that's sensitive to daylilies. You might find out that you have a loose bowel movement and that you feel a little nauseous after you eat it. You'll get better right away. You're not going to have flashbacks or anything. You just know that daylilies don't improve the digestive system. That seems to be triggered mostly by the raw tubers, but it's possible that other plants, other parts of the plant might do it too. Okay, so jewelweed is a medicinal plant. You could just take the plant and juice it up and apply that any place where you have poison ivy, where you think you're exposed to poison ivy. It has been clinically proven to work for some people. I'm apparently not one of those people, but I have seen it work for some people. But there's an edible part to jewelweed, and it's the ripe seeds and the seed pods. So you see when they look like that, and the angle is a sharp 90-degree angle. So that's when you want to extract those seeds from that seed pod and eat them. But here's the tricky part. When the seed pods form that sharp right angle, they will explode at the slightest touch. So one of the nicknames of this plant is touch me not, because if you brush against the seeds when they're ripe, they'll start exploding and just go all over the place. So what you need to do if you want to eat those seeds is sneak up on one of those ripe seed pods and grab it and have it explode in your hand. Don't worry, it won't hurt. And then when you open up your hand, you'll see these letters, A, B, C, whatever. And it's letter D that are the ripe seeds. And if you eat them, you'll find they taste just like walnuts, like store-bought English walnuts. They're teeny, they're not related to walnuts at all. It's just an interesting coincidence. And another cool thing you can do with a ripe jewelweed seed, you don't need to do this to eat, but just to see, is if you gently rub the outer seed covering off, the inner seed color, letter E, is this beautiful, bright robin's egg blue color. And I have no idea why the color's in there because no creatures ever see it. It's just one of those unexplained mysteries of Mother Nature. Okay, purslane, out now, very common farm and garden weed. And I would dare say if you've got it growing in your vegetable garden, that it is more nutritious than a lot of your conventional vegetables because it's high in iron. It's very good source of omega-3 fatty acids. You can eat it raw, you can eat it cooked. And one really fun way to use it is to just throw the purslane leaves in a gazpacho. And the texture of the purslane leaves works really well in a gazpacho. Okay, flowering raspberry, this is a native species that grows here in the Upper Valley. And these leaves are enormous. They look like maple leaves, but this is a raspberry. And the flowers are quite showy. So when I give talks on native edible plants suitable for planting in people's yards, this is always my talk because it's such a pretty plant and it doesn't have thorns. So, and it does produce raspberries. Here they are. Now, I'll be honest with you, I think a regular red raspberry is probably tastier because they're juicier. These fruits tend to be on the dry side, but the flavor is still good. They're still worth eating. Okay, and then I saw these today. So these are still in season now, the black raspberries. And I don't need to tell you what to do with the black raspberry. I'll tell you one fun thing they do though, is during the off season, the canes turn this really cool purpley color. You see that on the right. So it could be February, you could be out cross-country skiing, walking your dog, whatever. You're on the edge of a field, you see some purple thorny canes. Those are black raspberries. Remember where they are, and then go back in early July and look for the fruit. Okay, so Indian cucumber, this is a wonderfully edible plant, but there's a couple caution things about it. So the edible part, there's Ellen holding the edible part, the roots right there. And it's very hard to avoid killing the plant to harvest those roots. So I'm only thinking about harvesting this plant when I'm seeing hundreds of plants growing along the trail. And I have definitely in New Hampshire been on trails with this hundreds of plants where it's almost the predominant understory plant along the trail. If you're seeing it such profusion like that, pulling up a few plants, it's okay. The other problem is there is a federally listed rare species that bears very strong resemblance to Indian cucumber. So here's what it is. So this federally listed species, this is called the small world begonia. It's actually kind of orchid. And so the botanical name for the Indian cucumber I just showed you, that's Mediola virginiana, the botanical name for this plant is Isotria medioloides, which means looks like Indian cucumber. So how do you tell them apart? Well, you see they both have those whorls of leaves, but if you go back to the Indian cucumber, you see, oops, sorry, wrong direction. So you see how this plant has a double-decker effect going on. It's got one whorl and then another length of stem, and then a second whorl of leaves where the flowers and the berries form. The rare orchid never does that. So if you're only harvesting the double-decker Indian cucumber plants, you'll never harvest the rare orchid by mistake. And the double-decker plants have bigger roots in them. So it tastes like a cucumber, like a hickory. It's a very nice flavor. So I encourage you to try it. Once again, though, if you're seeing lots and lots of plants. Okay, so here's elderberry. So this plant is still blooming up here. I saw it on the way here. And some people will collect these flowers and make a drink from them. There's an alcoholic version, there's a non-alcoholic version. Some people will fry these flowers in fritter batter, but I think the black locust flowers I already taught you are much tastier. The other problem with picking the flowers off the plant is you're not going to get any fruit that way. You have to leave the flowers on the plant to get the fruit. And what you will see is this. And this photo is an upside down. That's what the ripe fruit berry clusters tend to do from the weight of the fruit, is hang upside down like that. Now, I understand that you can get a stomach ache if you eat a lot of raw elderberries, but if you dry them first, you cook them first, you can eat all you want. And I like to mix elderberries and apples together. So like elderberry apple pie, elderberry apple sauce is more interesting than just plain apple pie or apple sauce. Okay, so wintergreen, this is a plant you often see under conifers because then it doesn't have the broadleaf leaves that are covering it up because it's a very low growing plant. And this has the flavor like Clark's teaberry gum, the oldsters, you know, can remember that. Or wintergreen lifesavers, those are still around. But there's a plant, two plants with the same flavor in the twigs, black birch and yellow birch. Yellow birch is the one you're going to run into here in the Upper Valley. And you just can peel the twigs and put any day of the year, and put the peeled twigs in the peelings in a glass jar and let it sit around for an hour, and then it will taste like drinking wintergreen flavored lifesaver. And that's what I have for you in that blue cooler right over there. It's one of the things we're going to get to try as soon as I'm done. Okay, the handout tells you more about eating or drinking birches. Okay, so this is not poison sumac. I hope nobody's been really worried unnecessarily that this was poison sumac. So I'll show you what poison sumac berries look like. Very loose, drooping clusters of white berries. So any sumac with these upright clusters of red berries is not only not poison sumac, it's an edible sumac. And you make a drink from it. And we're almost at the time. So we've gotten to the point in the show where things are in the future. But this is going to be ripe in just a couple of weeks. These ripe berry clusters will be ready to use. And so you make a drink from it. And this is what I've done for you. So let me show you how to do it. So you pick the ripe berry clusters off the plant, you bring them home and you throw them in a bowl of water and you rub them in the water. And rubbing takes the flavor off the berries into the liquid. And the liquid will turn this pink or pinkish orange color there. Then fish the berries out. You're done with them. Take that liquid and put it through any kind of a filter like a paper towel. And what goes through, you can drink hot or cold. sweet or unsweetened. I typically drink it cold and sweet, like pink lemonade. And the entire time it takes, there it is, and the entire time it takes from picking the fruit off the plant to drinking the drink is a little as a half an hour. So that's what's in that red cooler over there is sumaking. So I have that in just a little while. Okay, so how did I do it? How can I make the drink when the berries aren't ripe yet? I dried berries last summer and made it from the dried berries. So you can also do that. Okay, so I'm happy to tell you there's no poisonous species of viburnum. There are some that don't taste good, but there aren't any that are poisonous. So among the edible ones are this wild raisin, and the fruits do taste like raisins. They do have seeds in them. You know, there's no such thing as seedless fruit that I'm aware of in nature because, you know, that fruit is a purpose and it's for animals to be attracted to the seed and, you know, spread those seeds around. So anyway, wild raisin is one, and then nannyberry is another one that grows up here in northern New England. And probably the funnest one is hobblebush. And this one you see where there's dappled sunlight in the woods, often when you're hiking like Mount Cardigan in New Hampshire, has wonderful hobblebush on both sides, on the AMC side and on the state park side. And then in September, you look for the berries. The berries will be soft and very dark purple, practically black when they're ripe. And the texture is like a stewed prune, and the flavor is kind of like a stewed prune with a little bit of a clove spice thrown in. So it's a nice thing to nibble on. And hazelnuts grow here. So there's the common hazelnut, the beaked hazelnut. The only difference is the appearance of the husk surrounding the nut. And so the key thing about hazelnuts, if you want to harvest them successfully, is don't let them ripen fully and hit the ground, because if you do, the squirrels and chipmunks will find them way before you will. You need to pick them directly off the bushes before the nuts fall. And as you see on these, the husks begin to turn brown. And that's the key that tells you this is almost ripe. And that's what you have to do to harvest them. And so now, I'm not sure how it is up here, but in Massachusetts, I look under power lines to harvest the hazelnuts. And I don't think it's the electromagnetic radiation. I think it's all the sun that they're getting. And plus, in a wide corridor like that, this is a great place for a squirrel and chipmunk to be because there's no cover. And so the hawks and the snakes and the foxes can see them and eat them in a place like that. So the nuts tend to stay on the bushes. And so I get plenty of that. Now, I'd be misleading you if I said to you, you know, you try to flavor wild hazelnut because the flavor is the same as cultivated hazelnut, and our walnuts are smaller. So you may say to yourself, I think I'll go to the store and buy hazelnuts. It's perfectly fine, but it is fun to find your own. And in my nursery, that's one of the seeds I gather and propagate plants. I have many hazelnuts in my nursery. I grew from seeds I gathered from the wild. Okay, so I gave you a handout on oaks and acorns, which goes into a lot of detail. I don't need to cover that now. I'll just talk to you about this photo, which is also reproduced in the handout. It's showing you the difference between what's called the hard oaks and the soft oaks. And the soft oaks, like this white oak, I believe some people disagree with me, but I believe that the soft oak species have the acorns are less bitter than the ones from the hard oaks, so they require less processing to make them palatable. But you can eat any acorn if you just leach the tannins out long enough to make it palatable. Okay, and then black walnuts. There's a black walnut growing right out there, just 50 feet from the back entrance to the library here. And so these are definitely here. And in the fall, in October, you're going to start to see these things looking like old green tennis balls. And you don't have to pick them off the tree. You can wait till they hit the ground. Don't wait too long because eventually the squirrels will take them all. And then they just pile up along the parking lot, the roadside, the yard like that. So a very, very common sight where I'm from. And I think, I've certainly seen places in New Hampshire where you can find these, including probably right here. And so the handout tells you how to get this messy, smelly husk off. So that's the first challenge. And once you've done that, the next challenge is to get these nuts open because these shells are really hard. So here's the device I use. This is the device I got from a company in Oklahoma. This does a good job to burst those nuts open. And then when you do that, so the handout gives you the recipe for the one on the left, and the one on the right is what I usually make. This is called black walnut honey squares because black walnuts and honey pair really well together. So any recipe using those two ingredients together is really, really good. Okay, so here's groundnut. So this is a native edible species that was, and I'm sure some tribal people are still using it as food. And it's a tuber-bearing member of the pea family. And it's an herbaceous perennial species, and the tubers are harvestable year round. So they're there all the time, including in the middle of winter. So I tell two stories in my book about fun times when I gathered this plant. Oh, let me just go to show you what the tubers look like. So there in the frisbee, what the tubers look like. So a number of years ago, I was paddling the Contoocook River. That's down, closer to Henniker in that area. So, and it was one of these springs, because sometimes it's good to paddle rivers in the spring. They got more water in them and stuff like that. And so the spring high water had scoured off the top couple inches of soil along the river, and the ground was just laying there exposed. So I just bent down and picked them up. And then another time I was skiing in central Vermont. It was one of these winters where you get above like 2,000 foot elevation. The snow was glorious, and below there, the ground wasn't even frozen. And so the place we were staying in down in one of the river valleys, the ground was not frozen. And so I went for a walk in the morning before breakfast, and I see the dried stalks and groundnut plants trailing up on the plants, and I just dug where they were, found the groundnuts. We had them for breakfast that morning. So yeah, so that's a fun plant. And the funnest way to use them is just to slice them thinly and fry them in a little vegetable oil and make groundnut chips. Okay, so here's a plant called Jerusalem artichoke that is a native species to the upper Midwest. It's not native to New England at all. And yet when the first European explorers to the New World, like the Samuel de Champlain and the Jacques Cartier types came, they saw the Jerusalem artichokes growing everywhere where there were Native American encampments. Now, how could that be if they're not native to this area? It's because our indigenous peoples for this region traded for it, is we had quahog shells and other things that appealed to the Western tribes, and we got Jerusalem artichoke tubers in trade in return. And some of the patches where Jerusalem artichokes are growing wild are either planted by or descended from patches that were established by Native Americans. And so the edible part of Jerusalem artichoke are the tubers, and they can have a purpley color on the outside or beige color on the outside. They're edible exactly the same way. These two harvests are made about 25 feet away from each other, so the two occur naturally. And there's the golf ball for scale. And you can use Jerusalem artichokes most ways. You use potatoes. You can bake them, boil them, mash them, fry them, and so on. And the time to harvest them is during the off season. So it's not now, because the plant doesn't need tubers now. The weather's great, so they can just grow. But as growing season begins to wrap up, that's when they start sending the energy below ground to have food storage over the winter time. So anytime from like end of September through the end of April, anytime the ground isn't frozen, you can dig up some tubers. Okay, so finally, let's get back to the autumn. So this is what the plants look like in the spring, and the flowers give off a very nice fragrance. So this plant is ubiquitous in Massachusetts, Connecticut. I can tell you that the main culprit for spreading around so much were the highway departments. They planted thousands of them along the freeways and stuff like that they built, because this plant can do what plants in the pea family can do. It can has its symbiotic bacteria attached to roots, so it can make its own nitrogen fertilizer. So they can grow in gravel pits, which is a good place to look for autumn olives. And we are going to see one on the Iconic Brook, so I'll be able to point out to you. So that's what they look like when they're blooming in May. And then there's a close-up of the flowers. They, as I say, they have very nice fragrance. And then that's what the fruit looks like when it's ripe. And so the picking can be really fast. You just want to make sure that the fruit is fully ripe, and you'll know that if it comes out with just the slightest little tickle. If you have to yank on it, it's not ripe yet. And the flavor will vary from bush to bush. Sometimes they're puckery and astringent, not very good at all. Other times they can be quite sweet. So I just play Goldilocks and I just test, because often it isn't just one or two of these. You'll see hundreds of them. And even in a patch where they're all going together, there's going to be variations in flavors. So I'll just wait till I find one that's really good. And that's the one I pick. And so to make that fruit leather, this is what, there's a close-up of the fruit. So they're pea-sized and they have silvery white speckles on the outside. And yes, you can eat them raw straight into your mouth if you want. Okay, so yes, so that's usually I'd fill up a basket like that. So I wasn't finding that many when I took that photo. And then you bring them home, you dump them in a bowl of water, just inspect them. So if you see any moldy ones, any misshapen ones, pull those out. Those will go in a little jar in the middle. And then the good ones go into the big pot. And you put just enough water in the bottom of that pot to keep the fruit from scorching, like a quarter of an inch. That's more than enough. And then you simmer them, berries, for a while in that pot. and soften them up. And then you put everything through a food mill, which is just a sieve or a strainer with an angled plate attached. You turn the crank and it pushes the pulp through the little holes. And if you don't have that, you just use a regular sieve or strainer and use a spoon to push it through. And then what you have is this frothy mauve colored puree, which I pour into trays in the food dehydrator, and I let it run overnight. So let me show you that. Okay, so I pour the puree into trays in the food dehydrator, let it run overnight, and then it gets into that fruit leather stage. So I just chop these up into little pieces like what you had. Was it any good?
Delicious.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
So mostly the sweetness that you're tasting in there is the natural sweetness from the fruit. In order to get the consistency of the fruit leather to come out, I do have to add a couple tablespoons of sugar, but it's mostly the natural sweetness. So besides tasting good, it has vitamin C in it, and the USDA did a study on the autumn olive fruit pulp a few years back, and they discovered that it's up to 18 times higher in lycopene content than tomatoes. So it can be very good for you. All right, and you can see you make wine from it too. All right, so with that, here's the last slide in the show. Now, I did not have time to talk to you about mushrooms today. That's another fascinating topic. I like to forage for mushrooms. There haven't been a lot of mushrooms out. I looked very carefully on the way here today, and I was not seeing any. I think it's just been on the dry side because mushrooms need moisture. So usually by mid-July, you should start to see them, but they're being a little coy this year. In upstate New York, where it's been wetter, they're definitely out. So, okay, so I apologize in advance for talking about mushrooms in this slide because we didn't really get to it. There's some other things in this slide I didn't talk to you about either. But anyway, so down here, there's some wild pears that I harvested on this day. This is a very successful foraging day I had about 2 decades ago. And then some shagbark hickories. I didn't talk about that either, but there's the autumn olives I did talk about. And then most of these mushrooms are Beleta essentialis, the porcini mushroom. This one right here is the Agaricus arvensis, the horse mushroom, and that can definitely go in the Upper Valley. So I guess the point of the photo is to talk to you about the barbecue grill, which is also in the photo. Like, why is that there? Well, somebody put one of those out with their trash, and I needed one of those too, so I just foraged for that while I was foraging for everything else. So with that, that's my show. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to take questions, and let me just say, I did bring copies of my book, and they cost $15, and I don't have Venmo or anything fancy like that, but if you cash or check, I'm happy to take it. And by the way, I don't keep any of the money. I give all the money to the land trust that published the book in gratitude for the fact that they allow foraging as a permitted activity on all their properties that are open to the public, and I'm so grateful for that. I just said, keep all the money the book makes, just buy more land with it. So so while you are thinking about questions, I'm going to see if I can find one other photo, one other plant that I thought was in this show, and I don't see it here. So I'm going to just, I'm sorry, I got to do it with this. Okay, so close. Any questions? Yes.
Will you dry the sumac and make it into the sumac spice?
Oh, thank you. I'm so bad. I should anticipate that question every time, and I don't sometimes. So sorry about that. I'm going to see if I can find. Okay, on my. All right, so let's go to this PC. The answer is yes, you can. And so that one I was mostly showing in the show, the staghorn sumacs. I had a woman who actually sells a lot to the chefs in New York City, which I don't do. I pretty much stay away from chefs. And she, okay, I'm going to guess it's in this one. And so she made some of this powder for me. She was so excited about it. She said, Russ, you got to try it. So I tried it, and it was furry. Like the staghorn sumac fruit is furry, so the texture kind of like deterred me. So I don't make the powder. So what I do if I want to use the sumac in cooking is make an extra strong version of that sumac cake with more fruit and less liquid, so that the product is really, really red and very, very sour. And then I just use the liquid in cooking instead of the powder. So that powder is made from Rus cororea, which is the Mediterranean sumac. So it's a cousin of what we have. Not the same exact thing, but it's a cousin. All right, let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Let me see if I can find this other PowerPoint that I think I pulled up here. Let's see. I thought I did. I'm sorry. I was trying to show you some wild grapes. You have a wonderful kind of wild grape here that I do have described in another show. And I'm just gonna try and find a photo. So any other questions? Yes.
I have several, but one is on the plants that you've shown us here, are they pretty safe and that there's not a lot of lookalikes out there that could be dangerous on these ones that you've chosen?
Yeah.
All right, so let me just X this out here for some reason. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, and maybe I'm just enough of a whiz with computers to pull this other show up. I'm just trying to open this other show. Yes, there we go. Okay, it says it's on the disk here. We'll see if that happens. Okay, so the risk of getting poisoned by eating a wild plant is relatively low here in New England because the vast majority of poisonous plants taste horrible. So my advice is don't eat plants that taste bad. It doesn't mean that every edible wild plant is going to be delicious straight from the bush or whatever. A lot of them require some kind of advanced preparation. But let's say that you think you found the right thing, you remember it from this talk, or you just see if I can get this thing to go. All right, so I really want to show you this because there's so much of this plant going here.
Does that really?
So the answer is there are a few exceptions to this, but the vast majority of the plants that are poisons taste horrible. Okay, so okay, good, I found it. All right, so now, but I have to tell you, I did not learn this stuff by walking down the trail, popping stuff in my mouth and see what happens, because I benefited from all the trial and error work by indigenous people, from the folks that were, when these plants came from Eurasia, that stuff was figured out there. And so, so here we are in the library. This is the true story of how I learned this stuff. After I took a mini course when I was a sophomore in high school, learned about 24 species of plants growing around the high school. I went to the town library, took out every book I could find on the topic. I taught myself 70 more species. By senior year of high school, I was teaching that class. Wow. Now I have this, I guess, somewhat unusual ability to just sit in an armchair, read a book, and be walking down the trail. And figuratively speaking, of course, the plant from the side of the trail goes like this to me. And I stand there and stare at it. And then eventually the Miss Clear said, oh yeah, you were on page 52 of this book that I just read about you. So the plants basically made themselves known to me. And just get a little touchy-feely about it. And so that's how I learned. And but I realized that most people that doesn't happen to them. And so that's why I'm doing walks like the one on Saturday, where we can go directly to the plant and say, here it is, and here's how to recognize, here's the kind of habitat it likes to grow in and stuff like that. Okay, so so you can think of your taste buds as a backup identification tool. So I don't make this a practice, but let's say I see a berry, I'm pretty sure it's going to be an edible berry. I don't know any berry that grows around here that's delicious and poisonous. Okay, so if it tastes good, it is good. All right, but if you put a berry, you think it's edible, and you put it in your mouth, give it a very brief taste, and you spit it out, the worst that can happen is you feel nauseous for a little while. It's because you scared yourself to death more than anything. Okay, you're not going to do any harm. You have to ingest poisons to have them really, mess up with you.
Yeah.
And most of the poisons in plants are ones that, just speaking frankly, you're going to poop out or puke out the poison before. Now, mushrooms are a different story. We didn't talk about mushrooms today. There are some lethal mushrooms out there that can kill you. The risk of getting into trouble with mushrooms is much greater than for plants. Okay, so let me talk to you about this one. So this is a species of wild grape. That's the one that you have growing around here. And you have a ton of it, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it. So this is called the Riverside grape, Vitis riparia. And I saw, yes.
I think, are you seeing it on your screen? Because we're not seeing it.
Oh, okay, I'm seeing it on my screen.
You might need to end screen sharing and then screen share again.
All right, I will. Thank you. Thank you.
Helps.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Okay, so now share again. Okay, there it is. Yes, share. How about that? All right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is called the Riverside grape, and it's not, there are no grapes on it yet because the grapes come out in the fall, so they wouldn't be there. And these grapes aren't what gets me excited about this plant because they're a little on the small side. And we have another species called the fox grape down in southern New England that has a much larger, sweeter grape that's really fun for stuffing your face right by the vine. These are quite tart. So you can absolutely use them to make grape jam, grape jelly, stuff like that. But I understand from people that do this, that this is the species over the fox grape that they think makes a better stuffed grape leaf. And you can still do that up here, although you're really past the prime time for gathering the Riverside grapes, probably can still find some. So what you want to do is look for a leaf that is fully grown but still young. Let me see if I can show that in the next slide. Come on. Okay. Let me use this. Okay. Let me just, pardon you while I just try to get us there. All right. Here we go. How about this? How will this work? Yes. Okay. So way before there's any grapes, you want to look like leaves like this. And the way you'll see this when you go out and look at any grapes that around here, because you have just this one. You'll see the leaves are smooth and green on the underside, whereas the fox grape, the one that grows in southern New England, that is bigger grape, the leaves are finely woolly on the underside. So these are very soft and tender. And so what I will do with these is like what I did with the curl dog leaves, is I blanch the leaves for 20 seconds just to soften them, to reduce the likelihood that they'll tear. And then you stuff them, and then I can show you what stuffed grape leaves look like, which you already know about. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So yes, and it's really fun to make these and have company over and say, yeah, those are wild grape leaves we picked and stuffed ourselves. So you may still be able to find some leaves that are at young and tender enough stage to make them. 2 or 3 weeks ago would have been a lot easier, but you may still find them. But there is one other thing you can do with grape leaves, and this might apply to some of you that make pickles. My understanding is that if you take a grape leaf and you put it in the jar where those pickles are, those pickles will come out crisper because the grape leaf was in there. All right. So any other questions? All right, so let's get over to the side over here and enjoy these goodies. Yes.
Do you know when the best time is to pick the wild blueberries in Mount Cardigan?
The best time to pick wild blueberries in Mount Cardigan would probably be a week and a half from now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, right. So you haven't missed it.
I have a quick question about this.
Yeah.
Did you say you were growing, like you have like a greenhouse that's starting these?
I don't need a greenhouse because native species don't need to
Right.
be
Well,
pampered or
what are you-
cuddled. They just, mostly I'm sowing the seed outside.
Okay.
Yeah, so I give a whole talk, that wasn't the theme of tonight, but I give a whole talk about how to gather seeds, how to propagate plants from seeds, how to plant them in the landscape and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get into all those details tonight.
no, that's okay. But I'm assuming all of these plants just to have a little bit more nutrition than any, you know,
A lot
like,
of them do. Yeah, I hear people make that assertion all the time that the wild plants are much more nutrient dense than their cultivated counterparts. My response is, I was going to eat them anyway. If they're actually good for me, so much the better. But the foraging, it's my form of communion. It's not wine and wafers. It's connecting to the outdoors. The outdoors is my house of worship, and then Mother Nature is my goddess, and my form of communion is nibbling on wild nuts and berries and nuts and roots and stuff like that. Okay, so I don't want to overstay our welcome to the library. So should I say goodbye to the Zoom people tonight? And sorry you're not here to enjoy the vittles that we have for the local in-person people. So let's so goodbye to you, and let's come over here.